That's right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your podcast and or your live stream of choice. Now, contrary to the last couple of months, this is actually live, not recorded. It's kind of impromptu. I kind of feel like I rushed it. And if you're really paying attention, you saw my opening graphic there somehow blew up to like 300%, fixed it halfway through, but hey, that's live for you. So I see some people in the chat room. I also see all those haters in the form of bots that are coming in there and adding in those downvotes. If anybody knows why, I have no idea. I see that a lot. There was nobody in the room, and all of a sudden all these downvotes started. They disappear when the live stream is over. That generally goes down to like 1 or 2 versus, I don't know what it was the last time that I looked. But anyway, I can't see them now. But if anybody knows, I'm totally curious about that because I can't figure it out. Or they're my haters, which is okay too. As I said in the chat room, I've got open lines. Even if you disagree with me altogether, I am here to take your questions. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. That's it. Now, like I said, that it is live. I'm looking at the chat room right now. If you guys can just, give me the thumbs up that you guys can hear me okay. It's in sync. It's not out of control or anything like that. So let me know because, again, live. I haven't done this in a while, and I'm excited to do so. So here's kind of the plan. I wasn't really planning on doing this. I was going to record a couple quick blasts that you guys see on this channel and do it that way. And then my wife and my kids went to my son's soccer practice. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm actually alone. That never happens. Let's just do things live. Let's see what happens. So that's why we're here. I got no plan. I got no PowerPoints. I'm going to do some browsing on the website in case you missed some of the articles. But other than that, it's just kind of, for fun. So the chat room, I'm going to watch it as much as I can. It looks like everybody pretty much, can hear me fine. So that's good. Appreciate it. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I can't watch the chat while I do this. I'm looking at my phone right now because what I'm going to do is open up the lines. Now, you're going to see the lines on the screen. There's a text in line. If you want your name said on the air, feel free to just sign it off in the text message. I'll be able to check for any questions. I've noticed a lot of people are shy, so it's okay if you don't want to call. Just feel free to text in. If you want to call, the lines are open. They'll just remain open. Despite people in the room, a lot of people don't call. That's okay too. But if you want to, feel free to do so. Just keep it respectful. I will do my best for audio and monitoring that because live being you're looking at the entire crew here. I'll try and make sure that it stays somewhat reasonable for you guys. So here's the deal. I didn't really get this situated here. There's a couple articles that, and I will check the chat when I can. That caught my eye over there, so I will do my best. But again, text in if you can, and I will pull up the text messaging right now. So couple articles appeared today. That's why I wanted to do the live stream. I was going to split it up into 2 quick blasts. I may re-record it just to see how this live thing goes versus, a more structured record. But in case you missed them, let me start with the shorter one first. This was an article I dropped this morning, kind of a short article, more so about the documents itself. If you guys haven't been paying attention to my feed, I have been following essentially since the story broke, so to speak, story, I use air quotes, about the Pentagon admitting to UFO debris, and they released the test results. Now, I'm not going to do a whole presentation for you, at least not in this live stream, but in short, if you've seen those headlines, it's pretty much bunk. If you haven't seen my videos and article about it, please, by all means, feel free to check it out because I go into great detail on why all of that was bunk. It was a misunderstanding in the form of the FOIA requester. It's a shame simply because he actually does have kind of a fun story, and it's just overshadowed by sensationalism. So I've got all of that on the channel, so I won't get into it. But it kind of made me realize that a lot of people haven't seen me post about UFO debris and UFO artifacts, so to speak, that are actually documented in the files of the United States government. Now, some of you may have seen my posts, and it comes as no surprise. Others may actually be surprised to hear that there are records that document physical objects of some kind that have been connected to UFOs, that they can't identify it, and are inside these government files. Here's one of them. Now, this is kind of a fun one. This is from a 1997 request that I did. The documents are actually 1947, potentially 1948, but obviously a long time ago. But I'm also dating myself here. This is one of the first requests that I did, that I fired off about UFOs. This particular one was to the U.S. Army. Now, here's what's kind of fun about it, because I don't mind getting stuff I didn't ask for. And then in this particular case, I did. I had asked for UFO material, stuff about essentially that whole niche, Roswell, flying saucers. But again, you guys can tell the scope was all about UFOs. And I got over 300 pages, well over 300 pages, the majority of which dealt with World War II era flying wing designs by the German Horten brothers. And they were designing essentially what Jack Northrop did with the B-2 stealth bomber. They were doing it for Nazi Germany. And it is an amazing history that I would recommend if you guys have any kind of interest whatsoever. It's very, very cool. Now, why did I get those documents on a request about UFOs? And quite simply, it's because the flying wing design in the late 1940s was referred to as a flying saucer. Now, I actually used this example when I debunked, and again, that's my opinion anyway, but debunked the whole theory that the Pentagon was admitting to UFO debris. But I use that as a reference to what I call, it's not official term, but what I call loosely responsive to a Freedom of Information Act request versus exactly responsive. Now, again, those are my phrasings, but it's just kind of trying to put a label on the experience I've had with dealing with FOIA officers in my requests. So in this particular one, I use this example because even though I was asking for the obvious unidentified flying object material, since flying saucers is obviously and commonly connected to UFOs, at the time in 1997, the FOIA officer decided to send me all of this information that they still had tagged as flying saucers, but they weren't unidentified. They were German World War II era flying wing design aircraft. So that's what I would call loosely responsive. Now, does that mean that this is connected to UFOs? Absolutely not. And that's what I was using the logic to essentially point out all of this loosely responsive versus exactly responsive. But using that example made me realize and recall, because a lot of times I'll forget, a document within it that was not about a flying wing design or a German World War II era anything. It was about a file folder that was labeled Flying Saucers from Denmark. Now you can see here in my opening graphic, it was handwritten. I'll show you in a second. It was also typed on the folder. And what the Army did was they photocopied the folder, some of the pages within, and then these pictures that essentially, let me pull up the documents here. And of course that didn't work, so I'm going to have to look at the screen. I apologize. There we go. Here we are. So these were the documents that came up. This is the file folder right here. You zoom out. I'm going to look at a couple different monitors here, so I apologize. My eye line's all over the place. So this was the folder, alleged flying saucers from Denmark. If you can't read it, flying saucers from Denmark. This was the file number. And inside, you can see that it was classified at the time. Low level. There may have been another secret stamp or top secret stamp. It's very hard to read, obviously, because of the age of it, and they're entirely blacking out lines. So this absolutely could say, top secret or whatever, downgraded to confidential, and then ultimately to unclassified around when I requested the material back in the late 90s. And inside the file folder about these flying saucers was essentially photographs of what is believed to be debris of some kind connected to this flying saucer case. The unfortunate thing was that there was no case summary. There was no witness testimony. There was no nothing. It was just these pieces of debris or a fragment of something that was recovered in Denmark during the 1940s. And you can see here's another one. So it was about, let me see from the measurement here, about 10 inches long, roughly by this picture, about 4 inches in diameter at its thickest, obviously cone shaped. Here's the back of it from it looks like. Very hard to tell because they're 50th generation photocopies, as they usually do. But also they don't send you the originals. They likely, in my opinion, probably do have prints of stuff like this. But in this case, they're sending these really cruddy photocopies. Now, what is this? I mean, we don't have any type of indication what the case was. Did this fall off of a craft? Not really sure. At the time in the 1990s, this was what's fun about running the Black Vault. Even though I found this interesting, there was really nothing I could prove about it. There was nothing that I could say, okay, look, this is the witness. This is where they were. They saw the craft for an hour and this thing fell off of it, or, whatever the story was. I couldn't do that. But I had these photographs, so I posted them online. What was very cool was after I had them on for a little bit, I received a letter from a man by the name of Bob White. Now, Bob White was not, let me term this the right way, not out of the ordinary in the sense that many people were coming to me with UFO stories. So that part wasn't surprising to me. What was surprising was he claimed to have a piece from the UFO sighting that he saw, the UFO craft. Now, I was then intrigued a little bit more at that point, because when you have physical evidence, okay, you might be onto something, maybe explainable, but at least there's something that you could see and test. What I was interested in was why he contacted me. And it was because of the Army documents that I had posted from the 1940s, which are here. I already went through and showed you. And from 1985, he had recovered this piece from a UFO. Now, let me be upfront and honest, because there's a lot of people that may have looked at the Bob White object before. It was very much bantered about in the past. But essentially, people think that it's a piece of slag from a piece of machinery that will machine. I don't know the exact breakdown of how this would form. But essentially, the skeptical explanation was in a machine shop using certain types of machine and metal splatter, that in time it could essentially create like these stalagmite type formations that they can, essentially break off and throw away. Now, that sounds like a very interesting explanation, and that's fine. Maybe that's what it is. But here's the kind of interesting part for me that really piqued my interest. I don't know if Bob really saw a UFO. It sounds like he did. He passed polygraphs. Sadly, he has passed away now. But when I knew him, I had interviewed him, talked about his polygraph tests, and I was producing for the History Channel at the time and ended up recreating his entire story and connecting it to these old Army UFO documents. But what is proven, even if skeptics want to say, well, you can produce this in a warehouse, factory, it's slag, it's from a machine, that's all fine. But what no one can explain is the fact that Bob White had his experience in 1985. That was about a decade prior to the Army declassifying those documents and essentially releasing them. The documents depicted something decades and decades prior from Bob White's experience and his encounter. And yet it's tagged from a flying saucer case outside of America, where Bob had his encounter. It was outside of Las Vegas. And the object looks incredibly similar. Hard to say it's exact, but incredibly similar. In the end, I don't know what to think about that. I honestly don't. I find the connection fascinating. The skeptical explanation for Bob's object is convincing enough to not dismiss it outright. But when you add in the Army documents as well, then you've got a very interesting connection to a flying saucer case from decades past that no one can explain. And so that, to me, I throw it out to you guys. I'm not saying it's alien, but obviously a very cool connection with declassified government documents from the United States Army and a UFO case that happened decades later. The coincidence that Bob would try and pass this off as a piece of a UFO and later, a decade later, find declassified documents with an object very, very similar that essentially connects a flying saucer case to an object that's very similar. The coincidence is too big for me. There's obviously something there. What it is, God only knows, but it is fascinating nonetheless. Got a couple text messages here. And I'm going to read them to you on the fly, so forgive me. This one is from Anonymous. Hi, John. Do you have an opinion on the 2019 Bainbridge Island Tic Tac encounter? I'm going to be honest with you. I, off the top of my head, that is not ringing a bell. So I apologize if maybe I'm just spacing out on it. But on a 2019 Tic Tac encounter, I can't really say that I know exactly which case you're referring to. Happy to look into it though. So definitely stay tuned and I'll try and look that up. This one from Leonard, very complimentary. Thank you. Thank you for keeping it real. Your information is not full of fluff. And you can add me to your mailing list. Perfect. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the compliment. Again, you guys can call in whenever you want. Text in those questions as I talk. It is very hard for me to read that chat room. I see it's kind of flying by here through the corner of my eye, but it's really hard for me to read that and try and somewhat keep focused here. Hey, John, here's another text message. Can you elaborate on the granulated debris tested at Stanford? Mike from Twitter. Boy, you guys are throwing all these questions at me. I'm not sure if you're talking about like I know that Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée, they're all kind of talking about a lot of the UFO debris stuff right now. To be honest with you, if that is what you're referring to, I do not have details on that. So I apologize for just kind of spacing on all of your questions here. I don't mean to do that, but these are ones that, to be honest with you, just not on the up and up to give you a solid answer right now. So let me close out the Bob White one. I lost my window, so I'm just going to shoot back really quick. Keep in mind, guys, don't call that texting number. I'm not going to be able to answer it. I can't patch you through. So call the 866 number. If for whatever reason you don't see it on your screen, it's 866-856-9722. Really quick, if you do decide to call, because I can't answer that on the texting line, please feel free to just sit on hold. If I do put you on hold, can't take you. The audio will not bleed through to your hold music. You're just going to hear music. So feel free to listen to your computer. When I can, I'm going to pull you on. Just make sure you turn your volume down for me. So here's the big article that I published a couple hours after that Bob White piece. This is the one that obviously gets a little bit more attention. Obviously, this one was much more structured. I think it came out to about 2,600 words. Yes, there's a lot of information in there, but I think that it is definitely worthwhile. Here's why. So back in 2017, based on all this publicity in the last week, it reminded me and a lot of other people about the 2017 New York Times article, which essentially made the claim, or at least talked about, modified buildings at Bigelow Aerospace that held UAP material, or they were modified to hold the material. The lack of clarity comes when you read the line, and most people walked away, and I'll admit it, that's how I walked away, thinking that they had the material. And in this article, I go into great detail about not only I ran a poll where 629 people took part, but more than 80% of the people that decided to take part said they absolutely felt that the debris were in those buildings, that those specially modified buildings were there holding the debris, not on the off chance that the debris was held. That narrative also was picked up by numerous big mainstream media outlets, not the tabloids or anything like that, but rather the metal alloys physically residing in those buildings was touted by Scientific American, Live Science, New York Magazine, Vice News, Space.com, Popular Mechanics, The Independent, Deadspin, and quite a few others that cited the New York Times. Now, the reason why I bring that up and preface this entire story is that I now know that I wasn't the only one who walked away from that article, because I was shocked for this reason. After I published last week an article, again, which I'll call the debunking of the claim that the Pentagon admitted to UFO debris, after I published that, I had cited that line in the New York Times that talked about the specially modified buildings and the debris that was there. And to my surprise, Luis Elizondo had reached out to me after reading it. And he felt that there was some confusion about that line that he wanted to clarify. And when he reached out to me, I was a little surprised, because I feel that I have tried to keep on the up and up here. And you know what? You guys might be calling and I might not be hearing it in my earpiece. I apologize. So, John, if you're listening, just sit tight with me here. I'm going to go ahead and bring you on in a second. But let me finish the preface here. So Luis Elizondo reached out to me, and I was surprised because he did have this concern. It was potentially confusing to some, myself included, because he said that he never told the New York Times that Bigelow Aerospace, through what New York Times was calling ATIP, but was technically the OSAP program, that's what Bigelow did, never had the metal alloy. They never got pieces of anything. And so I was surprised at that, because even though Bigelow had just recently said that as well, which I'll get into, what I was really surprised at was that is what the New York Times said. Let me read you the line on what they said. This is from the New York Times article. Under Mr. Robert Bigelow's direction, the company, Bigelow Aerospace, modified buildings in Las Vegas for the storage of metal alloys and other materials that Mr. Elizondo and program contractors said had been recovered from unidentified aerial phenomena. Researchers also studied people who said they had experienced physical effects from encounters with the objects and examined them for any physiological changes. That was from the New York Times article. I took away from that, whether the New York Times intended or not, that they had the material, that these buildings were either erected or modified, and the physical debris was there. When Mr. Elizondo reached out to me and wanted to clarify that, I was surprised when I read why he wanted to clarify, because I was wrong, and so were so many other people. Again, 80+% on this poll alone on my Twitter feed. I know that that's not a scientific representation, but still comfortable to say over 3/4 of the people that cared enough to take part in that poll, with a healthy margin of error anyway, more than 3/4 said, yeah, we felt the same exact way. Plus you have all those other periodicals that have essentially ran with the same narrative. And in 3+ years, I've never seen anybody say, whoa. We never said the debris was there. We said that they modified the buildings in case the debris ever got there, which I'll get into all of that. John, I don't want to keep you on hold, and I apologize if you've called a couple times. For whatever reason, it's not coming in through to my earpiece. John, are you there?
Hello?
Hi, John. You are live on the air. How are you?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I have a question, and it's got kind of a two-part to it.
Okay.
What is your opinion about the President Eisenhower close encounters? Have you ever seen any FOIA documentation that would you could elaborate on, or what is your personal opinion?
Great question. So I would say that no, when it comes to FOIA documents, I've never found anything to substantiate, the Eisenhower connection. We dealt with it in a show I did for the History Channel called UFOs in the White House. And it was a show I had created, which we later sold, obviously. We made it. And it was all about U.S. presidents and their connection to UFOs. And during the Eisenhower years, we tried to find any indication of all of the rumors, and there was kind of nothing there to support all of that. Obviously, then you have a lot of the MJ-12 connection and stuff like that. But sadly, there was no substantiation when it comes to the FOIA anyway.
Yes, sir. What about your personal opinion? Do you think that President Eisenhower met with aliens at, I think it was Edwards Air Force Base?
Yeah, in my personal opinion, no. I think that it's a story. I don't find truth to those types of rumors where presidents have had those essentially face-to-face encounters, namely Eisenhower. There's been other rumors that have surfaced over the years, but my personal opinion, no, I don't think that it's a true story. Sorry.
All right. Hey, it was really cool to hear it from you. I've followed you for a long time, and I really respect everything you do, man. You're an asset to the community.
Well, I appreciate that, John, and you got a good, strong name there, and I do appreciate the phone call.
All right. Have a good night, sir.
Thanks. You as well. Thank you. All right. Great questions. I hate to be a skeptic about some of them, but yeah, those, when we did that History Channel show, never found anything. So back to the Luis Elizondo story and him reaching out. What was happening next was that I really felt that at this point I should do an article, because there was a lot of confusion based on what he told me. And with that, I felt that I wasn't alone, which is why I ended up doing the poll that I did. And so as I started kind of really thinking about it, I realized how bad the claim really was, because on the side of this New York Times article. Now, again, this was the December 2017 explosive ATIP record that set us off on this journey the last 3+ years. And to see that we were kind of, I don't want to say maliciously misled, but it just wasn't clear. We'll just call it unclear for now. And so that's what kind of set me off on the journey to do this article, because I was under the impression, and so were so many others, that the debris was there. And obviously there was some confusion, and Mr. Elizondo wanted to essentially clear it up. I mentioned Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow also pretty much confirms that they never had anything by simply stating they never had any. Now, this was in an interview with MysteryWire.com. George Knapp runs that. If you're not aware of it, they do a lot of articles all the time. What I love is seeing historical videos find their way to the internet and get digitized. And that's what I believe is the strongest part of MysteryWire.com, because George Knapp obviously has an extensive collection, and they're putting it on MysteryWire.com. But in addition to that, they're doing some recent stuff, new material, new content. And part of it was an interview with Robert Bigelow. They posted a video where Bigelow opens up about OSAP. I was shocked because Bigelow has been completely mum about OSAP and ATIP and the New York Times article and so on and so forth. And so I really was interested in that. To my surprise, within that interview, Bigelow says, we never had any of the debris. And that to me caught me a little bit off guard, because that in my mind was never said by Bigelow before. There was one other instance, which I'll get into in a moment, but this was the man in charge. This was the man who got the contract. This was the man with his name on the building that essentially we were led to believe were modified simply for this reason. And yet he said, no, we never had anything. Now, the reason why I bring that up is, remember that original line with the New York Times said that Mr. Elizondo and contractors had said that essentially the buildings were modified for debris. And so I considered Bigelow the biggest contractor, so kudos to George Knapp for getting him to open up. But obviously the lead scientist, he is the senior science advisor, was his official title, to Bigelow's subsidiary known as Bass, was Dr. Hal Puthoff. And Dr. Puthoff was the one, if you listen to his Las Vegas lecture, he was the one that was in charge of not only OSAP, but the 38 reports that were created under OSAP. These are often referred to as DIRDs. And I messed up this acronym the other night on the air, and somebody wrote me a nasty letter about it. It is Defense Intelligence Research Document. And so, who knows, I probably messed it up again and I'll get hate mail. But regardless, they're called DIRDs. 38 of them. These are the ones that had come out where people were scratching their heads. Wait a minute, where's the UFO stuff? There was one about the Drake equation, which was kind of the oddball one in there. But that's the list that I'm referring to. According to Dr. Putoff, he was the one that farmed out those 38 contracts. He was the one that created the topics. In essence, if they had material, Dr. Putoff would know. He was the main cheese behind OSAP. So I reached out to him, said I was profiling Mr. Elizondo's comments to me, Robert Bigelow's denial that they had any debris. And Dr. Putoff was very brief, but he said Elizondo and Bigelow are absolutely correct. And so he confirmed kind of the nail in the coffin, so to speak, about the rumors that they had material and had debris. So that kind of put that to rest. Now we'll get back to the New York Times. I've got somebody waiting on hold here. Sorry that I got you on hold, but who's this?
Hi, John. This is Stephen Padilla.
Hey, Stephen Padilla, longtime listener, big supporter of the site. I always appreciate you posting my articles and stuff on your Facebook groups. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Just a quick comment, maybe a question or two.
Sure.
I've been following the UFO phenomena since the 60s. So I've been gathering the data, the information, and just whatever came out back in the mid-60s, 70s, all the way to up to now. And I always wanted to ask you a question. Back in the 70s, we had Peter Gershon, Stanton Friedman took the CIA, NSA to court to get UFO documents, which they got some, but they redacted them. How would you think that would fare out now if we were to take the CIA, NSA to court to try to get information?
That is a great question. Yes, you're right. There was a couple lawsuits, one with the CIA and one with the NSA. I've written about and did a video about the CIA one and made reference to those records. What would happen today? And to be honest with you, Stephen, I'm not really sure. I have not had a case. I've done appeals and have gotten very lucky where I have won some of the appeals, but I've never seen a case where I go, okay, if I invest X amount of dollars to sue the CIA or the NSA or whomever, these documents would come out. It's tough to make a case for these records to come out. The cases that you reference, and thank you, Cat Chaser, by the way, for that support. I really appreciate it. All super chat goes right into the Black Vault and supports making these videos. So, Cat, I really appreciate that. If anybody else had sent something, I'm sorry if I have missed it. So, Stephen, back to your question. So it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money to do this. And in the end, you don't get much on a lot of occasions. And with the NSA, what the result was there was essentially a public affidavit on why the NSA was covering up the material. But in the end, the judge sided with the NSA and said that all of the UFO material can remain hidden. When it comes to the CIA, as you noted, a lot of that stuff was redacted. So you may spend, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on fees and legal stuff. But in the end, what are you going to get? And the answer is, I don't know. I wish I had never-ending funds to just, throw at it. But legal cases and stuff get very, very expensive. It's very hard to know, what that would do.
Mm-hmm. And now, I don't know for sure if it's NORAD that's exempt from FOIA, but have you ever tried to use FOIA for NORAD? Because I hear that, they are really tracking of what's happening in our atmosphere. And there's been articles and testimony regarding they've called fast walkers going in and out of our atmosphere.
Yeah.
Is FOIA exempt from NORAD?
It is. Now, a quick story about NORAD. I had traced back Air Force material that was supposed to go to NORAD that was related to UFOs. And that was how I found out the hard way in the 90s that NORAD was not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. The Canadian government, because NORAD is what they call a binational command, so it's under control of both Canada and the United States. the Canadian government ended up giving me a ton of UFO material that NORAD had denied was there. So even though they're not subject to the FOIA, they have internal rules and regulations that mimics the FOIA, and they essentially try and process your request in good faith. Sadly, with that particular case, it was proven, no, they didn't really. I found the UFO documents through the Canadian government, but NORAD directly told me, oh, no, we don't have any. So that's a quick little side note about NORAD. But sadly, no, they are not subject to FOIA. In regards to fast walkers and slow walkers, I've tried to push on documents about that. I do have records on those types of tracks that NORAD does track. So you might want to check the Black Vault, just search fast walkers in the government document archive. And if you can't find it, just shoot me a message on Facebook or email and I'll send you the link. But I do have some documents there. It's obvious they are seeing unknown tracks out there. What exactly they are is anybody's guess. But yeah, I wish NORAD was a little bit more open.
And I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. I think it's important information, but also part of history, of having documents that shows our history. And I appreciate the work you've done. The work you have done too. I think I was past here that you found a website that the FAA was collecting UFO data, and you would go and there was cases of sightings. Do you recall that?
I do, yeah. Yeah, that was research I did that showed that their drone database that was supposed to just be tracking drones was also chronicling UFO encounters and, saucer-shaped and long cigar-shaped, or if you want to call them tic-tac-shaped. So I found references to UFOs in that.
And I just want to thank you for your work and you always could put things in perspective, and I appreciate that. Whenever something comes out, you put things in perspective instead of jumping the gun and believing everything that happens in the UFO phenomena regarding data. And I want to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you again for all of your support. I know sometimes putting into perspective is never what everybody wants. I know that sometimes it's no fun to hear, but I really appreciate those kind words. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, John. Bye-bye.
Thanks. All right. So thanks to Stephen. So feel free to give me a call. Again, if I don't pull you, you'll just be put on hold for a little bit, and I'll pull you on. So back to the New York Times buildings and the debris story to kind of finalize this, because as I just went over with Bigelow, with Elizondo, and with Dr. Putoff, they all they all agree with each other that there was never any debris there. So let's just assume for a moment that the New York Times didn't mean that, and that is what Leslie Kean had told me. Now, in fairness to her, at the bottom of the article, just so I'm not going to read everything, but I did publish full statements, as I usually do on articles like this, by everybody I speak with. Now, it just so happens that most of them were published in full. However, Leslie Kean was not, for no other reason other than it was lengthy, and I pulled the most important part. That most important part was talking about how I mischaracterized them, and I wanted to make sure in the article that she had her say on what her stance was against what I was essentially implying. She says, "You mischaracterized what we said. We did not write that Bigelow had collected material through OSAP or that Bigelow ever had material at all. We said that Bigelow Aerospace modified buildings so that they could store materials recovered from what contractors told us had been retrieved from unidentified aerial phenomena." Now, that's okay. I can actually accept that if that were a standalone statement and that's all we had. That maybe it was, in my opinion, poorly worded, but I can understand that. However, I dug up an interview by Ralph Blumenthal. He was one of the 3 co-authors that wrote this explosive article and wrote that paragraph as well. All 3 names were on it: Ralph Blumenthal, Leslie Kean, and Helene Cooper. And in this December 17th, 2017 interview with MSNBC, that's the day after that they published their article, so obviously fresh on his mind, Ralph Blumenthal goes into great detail about a section in their article and references the material. Now, the only section in their article that references material is about the material housed in these special modified buildings. In addition to that, he calls back to that section, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I'll pull up the quote here so I don't. Let me not paraphrase. Give me 1 second here. Here's his quote. They have, as we reported in the paper, some material from these objects that is being studied so that scientists can find what accounts for their amazing properties, this technology of these objects, whatever they are. They are studying it. It's some kind of compound that they don't recognize. Now, those are some darn specific wordings on debris that they apparently weren't saying was there. If you're talking about if you're talking about compounds that are, in his words, they don't recognize them, that's a pretty explosive thing to say about debris that isn't there. Now, I'm only throwing some sarcasm in there because it's obvious he's calling back to the article, and it's obvious that they were saying debris were in these buildings. Debris was there. Okay, he's talking about the test results, and that was the day after the article was published. That is on MSNBC. I've seen the video. It's not a misquote. That transcript is something I typed myself directly from the video. You can find it online as well. Now, fast forward to 2020. Now, in 2020, there's a YouTube channel called Project Unity. He got an interview with Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal on his channel. They talked about specifically the material. Now, here's what Ralph Blumenthal said in 2020. We did report that Robert Bigelow, who was a contractor on the program and was close to Harry Reid, who got the money for the program, built a warehouse to hold retrieved materials. That was in the story. That's as far as we got. That's as much as we can find out at the time. Now, that is Ralph Blumenthal. He continues on to say that they learned that no materials were provided. Okay, so that's a quote. No materials were provided, and that, another quote, they never were put into the warehouse. So if he only said that they weren't put in the warehouse, maybe he'd have an out. That even though they weren't in the warehouse, they still tested the material. Yet he also adds in, no materials were provided. So if no materials were provided, how could they test something they never had? That to me is proving that that's what they intended to say in the New York Times article. So we have these kind of flip-flops on the story, because what happened to the details on the test results and the compound that was not recognized? I don't know. Let me pause there. Somebody's on hold. From Canada, who's this?
Hey.
Hi, who's this?
My name's Thomas. I'm a big fan of the show.
Hi, Thomas. Well, thanks for that. You got good taste. I'm kidding. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
So I had a question.
Sure.
So I know you don't speculate much on this topic, and I really appreciate your objective approach.
I appreciate that.
To the UFO phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wondering, in your opinion, what do you believe is the reason for the government secrecy, and what do you believe the UFOs are?
Those are two great questions. If I can have you just turn the radio down in the back, if you could, that would be awesome.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. So, and I'm sorry about the delay. I know that there's a weird delay here between live and the delay on YouTube. So here's the first part of your question on why the secrecy. And simply put, I believe the national security risk, if I were to place a bet in Las Vegas, the national security threat is that they don't know anything about what's going on, that they're clueless, that they don't have the answer. And as silly as that sounds, because we think that the government is all knowing and that they know what's going on and they're covering it up. To be honest with you, I think there's a huge possibility that they actually don't know what's going on. They know the phenomena is real, that they know that it's there, and that they know that it's not China, Russia, Iran, or whomever. And that in itself, I believe, is a national security risk, because when you tell the American people that, and I know you're calling from Canada, and obviously I'm focusing on the American government, but I think that this could be applied elsewhere as well, where when you take comfort that your government is powerful and all-knowing and you're safe when you go to bed at night, the moment you tell them that there's an intelligence that is doing whatever and wherever they want and they can't control it, I do believe that War of the Worlds scenario of old is still true today. And I get a lot of heat for having that mindset because, again, people want the conspiracy to be that the government knows and they're covering it up and this is all extraterrestrial. I think it's quite possible that they are just as clueless essentially as we are, and they just don't have answers. So that's your first question, and hopefully I answered it for you. The second part of what do I think they are? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to speculate on that because I've never seen anything. Not to give a shameless plug, but I wrote a book that came out last year, all on the government documents and so on. And in the last chapter, what I did was really sit down and talk about all of the skeptical explanations for what UFOs are. And what I tried to do was using the evidence that I could prove to you, meaning documents and in some cases photos and so on and so forth, but all obtained by the government. I believe that there's a strong case to dismiss all of the skeptical explanations that are out there. And the alien narrative is one you can't dismiss yet. Now, we may find out one day that there's nothing there and, we're alone in the universe or some silly thing, which I wouldn't believe. But, maybe one day that'll happen and then we can dismiss it. But at this point, I don't think you can because government documents. Please go ahead.
There's definitely something.
Right. Yes, the phenomena is real. There's no denying that. It's documented not only by people like you and I in the private sector, but also by the U.S. government and U.S. military, period. Nobody can deny that. Yeah. No skeptic can say that the phenomena is not real. What you can also prove too, and you can do this quite a bit, is using what the military and government will admit to and then juxtapose that with what is known at the time. And that to me is a lot of fun to do because if they clock something at going, X amount of miles per hour in 1980, and then you cross-reference what the speed records were in the air at that time frame, and whatever this object is, it's going faster than that. That to me, those are interesting correlations that don't get a whole lot of attention a lot of times. I just did that with a CIA document on this channel where the object was going hundreds of miles faster than what the fastest aircraft at the time could do. It was a physical object. There was really kind of no controversy on whether or not it was there or not. It was all documented. Sure, you can say that the person just made it all up. But again, there's some point you got to get over that kind of stuff and realize, no, these people are seeing stuff in the military, in the government. They're documenting it. It's really there. Why can't we account for it when it comes to our technology? So long-winded way of answering your question. I don't want to say it's alien because I don't know, but I can say that that is on a very short list of explanations based on the evidence that I can prove.
And I mean, even if it is some sort of government breakthrough, that would be such a huge breakthrough in science that it would almost have the massive implications of aliens,
right,
in my opinion.
Yeah, and
because of just
go ahead.
I wouldn't expect to see something like that for at least another 150 years. The types of things that they're talking about, like going hundreds of or tens of thousands of kilometers an hour, coming straight down from space and stopping on a dime and tracking these jets. I mean,
and you're absolutely right there. And my point to the government connection to this, because that's obviously a skeptical approach and a healthy skeptical approach. I didn't mean that insultingly. It's one that I lean towards a lot as well. However, when you deal with a lot of the documentation and even now the statements that the military is giving, what I find fascinating is they're willing to go on the record and say not only are they unidentified, of course they could be lying, but I don't see motive for it. They're unidentified. When you go back decades in these documents that exhibit this type of advanced technology, a lot of them remain unanswered. Meaning, let's say that there was an incident in 1976, and at the time we had no idea that this craft was ours and we could do something like this, but we just didn't know it at the time. 30 years goes by and all of a sudden they declassify it and we go, oh, wow, that's what that was. A lot of times you can't do that, even 40, 50 plus years after the fact. Now, is that classified technology? Well, maybe, but I'll add one other curveball to the theory in that a lot of these documents that are coming up that are depicting unidentified objects, they wouldn't come up in FOIA requests just based on how the FOIA works, simply because they would know what the objects are. They wouldn't go in as intelligence reports here in America about their own craft or technology. It may be solved later on. Maybe one military branch doesn't know what the Air Force has or whatever. That was a theory I posed with the Nimitz encounter. Yet the Pentagon denied that they would test their Air Force technology against the Navy. And I was surprised that the Pentagon blew out that theory because I thought a healthy explanation might be Air Force tech, maybe a drone, tested against the U.S. Navy without their knowledge. So that way, no one's lying. Navy says, yeah, we have no idea what it is. They're telling the truth. Behind the scenes, the Air Force absolutely knows what it is, and it's classified technology. But a lot of these documents and cases, they just don't have that. And so even though I think a lot of cases maybe can be top secret tech, that's why I love the documents so much, is that when the military and government says we have no idea what it is, generally that means that they have no idea what it is. I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope that answered your question. I really appreciate you calling, especially listening in from Canada.
It definitely does, and I just want to say, like, I really appreciate your channel and everything you're doing and how much time and energy you devote to this. I think it's really important what you're doing, and the fact that you do this so much and you get all these documents it's really it's a gift to all of us in a way, because we all want to know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, well, me as well, but I really appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. And you take care of yourself. I hope you call in again.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, so thanks for that, caller. Daryl, thank you so much for that super chat support. Your question, do you not believe there is proof of aliens visiting us now or in the past from another world? Yes or no? Irrefutable proof, Daryl? Sadly, I'm not going to be able to say there's irrefutable proof. I don't know. I haven't seen something that makes me convinced to that level. Possibilities? Absolutely. I've seen enough to think that is on a very short list of possibilities, but sadly, I just don't know for sure. And that's just a personal thing of mine. I need to see to believe, and I haven't seen that irrefutable proof yet. Now, I have a caller on hold. I've got a bunch of text messages. I'm going to do this as quick as I can. I want to finish off the Bigelow story just so you guys kind of get a button to that story. Excuse me. So going back to it, obviously I went through the contradictions behind the New York Times journalists and what they were saying, what they weren't saying, what did they intend. I'm not really sure. I don't think that they were trying to be malicious. But I would say based on the past, and I have a video on this as well, their past article that came after 2017, obviously, but their off-world vehicle article, there were a lot of retractions in that, and one major one about Senator Harry Reid. That's carelessness. And I don't mean to really kind of be insulting saying that, but it's carelessness, and that's what I think. So I don't want to say that they were malicious and misleading. I'll let you guys determine that. Careless is I think, a very good word for all this. Now, those buildings, here's another question, and I don't have an answer to this, but I'll throw it out to you guys just to kind of button this story. Another fact that came out in George Knapp's interview with Robert Bigelow is how much money he spent modifying those buildings. Now, we know, based on the article, $22 million went towards Bigelow Aerospace. That was determined by George Knapp, clarifying that as well. $22 million went to Bigelow Aerospace's subsidiary, Bass, over the course of a couple years. And what did we get for that $22 million? We know that we got 38 reports, some of which were just released under the Freedom of Information Act. A lot of other ones have leaked. They're highly scientific, some of which are controversial. $22 million worth. You know what? I've done a lot of FOIAs on government waste. If you ask me, no, it was not worth it, but who knows? I'm not a scientist, and I get often attacked because I won't comment on the science. There's some argument out there that this is all valuable science, but a lot of it, sadly, is just more fringe science, speculation, stuff that can't be substantiated. So I'm not knowledgeable enough either way to support it or debunk it. So I leave that to people that are smarter than me when it comes to the science. But let's talk about the buildings for a second. According to Bigelow, he spent many millions of dollars modifying those buildings. Who paid for that? If it was taxpayer OSAP money, that was the money that went from the Defense Intelligence Agency over to him, how did he know, or why did he believe he was getting the debris? He was talking about making, and I'll read his quote here. We had bought facilities, spent many millions of dollars in buying buildings, and I did have a large program to do a major construction on this property besides what we had already have here, and that was going to be really fun and cool. So we have nothing that would protrude the surface much. I was going to use life support systems that you use in space because you don't have a door you can go out of or a window you can put up. So you survive based on the ecosystem, the environmental control support systems that you create on board your stations. And so I was going to actually implement those into the underground facility, which was going to be substantial. And so that was a lot of fun to do. Well, that's awesome. Sounds very, very cool. Kudos to him. But why do you need that to store UAP debris? Why were those modifications done? These are questions I don't have answers to. I've reached out to Bigelow Aerospace for comment, but who paid for it and why? So if it was taxpayer dollars, who told him that he was going to get debris? That's a big deal in my book, because he's getting these major upgrades, some of which never took place. Other ones did. He said he spent many millions of dollars on his upgrades. If he did it out of his own pocket, kudos to him, because I don't know why. If the government said, we're going to give you UAP debris, and you go, okay, and you shell out millions of dollars like that, aren't you going to be pretty upset if you don't get that UAP debris? You just spent millions of your own dollars to do it. So if he did, kudos to him for taking the gamble. But I would be pretty upset, and I would be pretty outspoken if I was a government contractor, invested millions of dollars and got absolutely nothing that I was promised. Or was it taxpayer money? And if so, who told him? Who said? I want to know. I think we all should know, because if they were many millions of dollars that went to building upgrades for absolutely nothing, I want to know why there was a need for such extravagance. Alien Scientists, thank you so much for your donation. Can we really trust Knapp and Bigelow, though? Don't you think there are other programs than just Bigelow Aerospace? Great question. Can I trust Knapp and Bigelow? Well, I don't trust anybody. I question when my mom calls and I ask her, Mom, okay, so where were you? And I try and verify. Of course, I'm joking. I don't really trust anybody, plain and simple. I only trust what I can verify. And a lot of people harp on me for, relying on FOIA and this and that. I don't believe that FOIA is the end all be all, but I use it because when I go on this channel and talk to you guys, I can prove what I'm saying. When it comes to people, Knapp and Bigelow, I don't know. I really don't. I don't know who to believe when it comes to this. All I know is that we're not getting the full story. And all I know is that pretty much all of the cast of characters have been, I would say, caught in at least saying very controversial things and unproven or unsubstantiated, and that's across the board, all the way to proven, I would actually argue, fabrications or clear contradictions to things they've said in the past. So who do you trust? I don't know. All I care about is what we can prove, not what you believe. It's what we can prove. So I hope that answers your question. I just go by the evidence. That's really all I can do. Daryl, I believe, Daryl, you had supported earlier, and I really appreciate that. If it's a different Daryl, I apologize. Thank you for your previous candor. I'm so happy to have discovered this channel this week. So what do you make of Richard Doty? Great question. I have reached out to Richard Doty a few months ago. In fact, it was quite a few months ago to be interviewed on this channel. I'm curious about really what the real story is, according to him anyway, about some of the Paul Benowitz stuff. There's a lot of accusations out there, and I never like talking about stuff where I don't get the other side. So I reached out to him with the craziness of COVID and the pandemic. It never came to fruition. I'm partially to blame for that. My wife, not that I'm blaming my wife, but she pulls a lot of long hours at the hospital. She's in charge of a COVID unit. So I record when I can. So it's why you've maybe seen a little less actual interviews versus me doing shows, simply because it's so hard to plan because schedules are so up in the air. Plus I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, which might be coming through my door at any moment. So I'm going to get through a couple more of these questions. But Daryl, thank you so much. I have seen my phone blow up here, and I'm going to kind of read a few of these. I hope that I can get through a lot of them. Give me 1 second here. From Australia. I'm going to read these on the fly here, so some of them may not be questions. Hey, from Australia, love your show. What do you make or not? June 2020, do you think it's still a goer? June 2021, I assume you mean the UAP or UFO report. I'm going to do a whole more in-depth video. I was just interviewed by Fox in New York today that aired a segment on this very topic. In short, I believe, number one, we're going to see a delay with this UFO or UAP report with the Senate and Congress. If or when it comes after that delay, because the government loves to delay pretty much everything, I think we're going to see a very watered down public version. And if you read the print in the bill, it says that they have room for a classified annex. So I think we're going to get a public report. I think we're going to hear a lot about drones and balloons, UASs. Those are the unmanned aviation systems. We're going to hear about the FLIR 1 video, the gimbal, and the go fast, because they've admitted to those. So I think they're going to fluff those into the report so it makes it look like they're getting something. I don't think there'll be anything new when it comes to cases. That will be in the classified annex. Not because I want to be a Debbie Downer, but simply to back up why I say that is because the U.S. Military and government both has stated that the UAP task force findings and the cases are going to be classified. Now, that's obviously through the public affairs offices. I've received that through the Department of Defense and the Pentagon. I've also received it through the Navy. What does that mean? It likely means that through the public affairs anyway, we're going to get nothing. But what I say with the FOIA, challenge accepted. We'll see if we can get anything through FOIA. Hey, John, what are your thoughts on the Roswell incident? Oh, man, that is a huge video in itself. To summarize it quickly for you, and this isn't going to be adequate, but I'll say this. We'll never get the right answer. I don't believe the answer we have is the right one. And I believe that at this point, what really happened is lost in history. You have a lot of the witnesses that have passed away. You have even the greatest researchers on the Roswell incident have passed away, like Stanton Friedman. There's other ones too. Please don't get me wrong. Kevin Randall is still around. So please don't let me discount those. But what I'm saying is that I think when it comes to the evidence and the witnesses, we're not going to get a straight answer. And I think it's interesting. I don't think we've gotten the full story. Is it alien? I don't really know, but it's definitely not what they say it is, in my opinion. John, you're the real deal. I appreciate that. Appreciate your diligence all these years. Great analysis of the latest released Pentagon documents. Love the Secrets of the Black Vault. I appreciate you buying that book. Thank you. JT from Indy, getting it done. Oh, JT. Met JT through Fade to Black. Thanks, JT, for listening in. One of the coolest on-air calls I ever took. He honked on the freeway somewhere in the great America, United States of America. He is a hero keeping our supply lines working through this COVID crisis, and he was out there listening in and gave us a honk on the air. Very, very cool, JT. Thank you. Hi, my name is Dave. Great show. The New York Times is said to be working on a story involving alleged UFO crashes. Any thought on that? Well, Dave, thanks for writing. I think that is a rumor, one that stems back quite some time to the Wilson Davis document, which I've done a video on this channel about. One that I don't believe holds any weight, at least not for the New York Times to cover it. When their last Off-World Vehicles article came out, it was rumored that was supposed to deal with more UFO crashes and the Wilson Davis document and so on and so forth. But obviously that wasn't in there. Then the off-world vehicles stuff became a big mess where they attributed Harry Reid to confirming there was off-world vehicle wreckage. That was untrue. The only leg they had to stand on was Dr. Eric Davis, who brought nothing but his word. So I'd be surprised if they did it. And if they do, well, they're going to have to bring a lot of evidence along with them because I don't think it's there. Hey, my name's Josh. Can you show us the biggest piece of evidence on UFOs, or do you believe the government is still hanging on to some info that they don't want us to know? Well, Josh, great question. I can tell you for an absolute undeniable fact that they are holding on to UFO information, classified all the way up to the top secret level, and they've denied me on numerous occasions. If you go onto the Black Vault in the document archive, I've got quite a few different pages, which I feel are some of the best evidence when it comes to documentation. If you go to the fringe category under UFOs, you're going to see quite a bit. I'm starting to run out of time. Let me get this call. Let me see if you're still on hold. I apologize for keeping you on hold. Are you still there? You still there? Nope. I think I lost them, so I apologize for that. I'm new to your channel. In the last week, I've watched several of the videos on your channel. I'm curious, for all that I've seen so far, do you believe that there are aliens from other worlds that have or are currently visiting Earth? Here's a speculative question. So it's a great one. I love this particular topic. When it comes to government documents, I'm here to tell you there's no smoking gun. There's nothing that'll tell you aliens are 100% real. They're here. The government knows about it. And that's what your smoking gun is. We don't have that. What we do have is a mound of evidence that piles high that definitely paves the way for that potentially being a reality. Now, the speculation part where I come in is I love the discussion about intelligence, and that's come up on this channel a couple times in live streams, and I've said I'm going to do a video about it, and I think maybe your question is going to motivate me to do it. It's pure speculation. There's no government document, but what I have done for Discovery Channel and History Channel are multiple documentaries that both dealt with alien intelligence. How would we communicate? In what ways? Why would we communicate? And talking about the intelligence gap between humanity and a civilization that, let's say, has a 200 or 500,000 year head start, even a million year head start. Could we communicate at all? Would they care if we are here? There's so many awesome questions that I love to speculate about, and I stress that it's just pure speculation. I don't have the undeniable proof they're here. At least that's me. I know some of you that might be watching or listening do. And I can definitely appreciate that you have that. But until then, for me anyway, it's speculation. Let me get this call from Chicago. Who's this?
Even a million could be communicated at all.
Hello? You there?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes,
I'm gonna have to ask you to turn your radio down in the back. Who's this?
This is Brandon Burton. I'm calling in here from the Chicago area.
Hey, nice to have you call in. Thanks so much for doing so. What's your question?
Well, let me say that I am so glad that you just keep it so real. But I've been working in the government, started with the Navy, still in the government now, almost getting close to 30 years, and you are dead spot on with all the FOIA requests. I've dealt with FOIA requests myself, and a lot of times we just, even if we had the materials, we don't even know the first place where we would even look for them. So I love that you portray it like that, because it's not usually a conspiracy, at least on our end. It is government bureaucracy. And my question is you're talking about Bigelow and the supposed possibly having some of space debris. What's your feeling, John, with the New York Times article had 3 authors, and you've already identified subsequent interviews and so forth right after the article that seemed to lend credence to them actually saying what they meant to say in the New York Times article. It seems like they're walking it back now. Do you get the feeling, and I'll just take your answer off air, but do you get the feeling that maybe someone has sat them down in a room and said, you guys are going to walk this back?
Well, I do feel that they're walking it back. And the reason why I say that is that 2020 interview and thank you for calling, by the way, that 2020 interview from Ralph Blumenthal. If Ralph in 2017 with MSNBC meant something different, if he was talking about something else, I mean, I really listened to that interview 12, 15 times over and over, trying to find what he was talking about. But the clear reference to his article, the clear indication they had material, the clear indication that there were test results, that to me proves that they intended to say that. Now, if it was a mistake, that's okay. I make mistakes all the time. I mean, you know, I'm not here to be the police, nor should any of us. But the problem is that if you just leave well enough alone, especially a New York Times article, just kind of pretend it never happened, and then essentially walk it back a couple years later in when you're talking about the same exact topic, and they go, and then you change your story to say, well, there was no material, they never got any, nothing in the buildings. Well, wait a minute, that's the perfect segue to say, when I was talking to MSNBC, I was, XYZ, I was referring to this, or I was led to believe, but sadly it did not come out, that's a correction, whatever. And there's 1,000 ways to do it. Ignoring it, though, is something that, the walking back is very, very red flaggish to me, and very frustrating, because we know what they said. I mean, it's clear, and no one has ever clarified it, I think anyway, until now. And that's what's frustrating, and that's what sparked me to do this. And I think that it hurts credibility. I mean, if I started throwing out videos to you guys and just, speculating without telling you speculation, and then changing the story over time, but not noting that I was giving you wrong information, that's bad. I would expect you guys to unsubscribe and never watch me again. So that's why I'm very detail oriented, sometimes to a fault, where I give you guys as much information as I can. When this kind of stuff happens elsewhere, it makes, I think, everybody rightfully so question it. And that is unfortunate, because the New York Times has a heck of a reach. They have a heck of a powerful name, regardless of what you think about them. They have a masthead that speaks, meaning if they publish an article, it's very, we'll call it prestigious, if you will. And so for them to tarnish this topic is detrimental in the bigger picture. And that's why I get a little passionate about it, because it is frustrating. Daryl, you are rocking it tonight. Thank you so much. In addition to Doty, could you also get Haim Ashed? What do you think about Ashed's claim as the former head of Israel's military space program? Well, I am familiar with that. For those who aren't, obviously he is somebody that has come out and talked about UFO/alien knowledge, and that how the U.S. government is in on it. And, there's a lot of speculation about what he's trying to say. What my concern is that he's not alone being an ex-government and or military official coming out claiming that governments are a lot more knowledgeable than they are. So even though it's exciting to hear, what I would say in response to it is the fact that he brings nothing with him. And that's frustrating to a researcher, just simply because it sounds great. And of course, him being a former, XYZ is also great. And he's another name that could be tacked on a larger list of people that have come out. The problem is we don't have that irrefutable proof yet. So it's like when these guys are working inside and they want to come out and say, you know what, I'm going to tell the world that Donald Trump, when he was president, knows all about this, but I'm going to bring proof. And then they do that. That's great. That speaks volumes. But it's like when they're inside, they don't get anything to take with them. They just come out and talk about it later with nothing to provide as evidence. And sadly, that's frustrating. So I'd love to have him on, though. I always love great conversations like that, and I'd love to press him a little bit on exactly what did he see, does he have, if anything, to support what he is saying. Let me go ahead and go to the phone line. Sorry to keep you on hold. Who's this?
Hey, John. This is Ryan from Philadelphia.
Hey, Ryan from Philadelphia. What can I do for you?
Nothing. I just had a quick question, and first, just want to thank you for all you do. This is definitely, if not the only channel that's, you guys really back up everything you say on here with legitimate information. It's a wealth of knowledge watching you on here. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and real quick, I've been studying this subject of UAPs, UFOs for a little bit now, but I guess the last 2 years I've been watching a bunch of interviews with Lou and Christopher Mellon and that team, and what really kind of struck me was Lou it seemed like he has done a ton of interviews, but with the interview he did with you, he seemed to let out a few, I guess, a few tidbits of information that I had not heard him say before. And there's a few, but I'll ask the one question just for time's sake. When you asked him and he mentioned ATIP or ALSAP, whichever one was at the ranch with Eric Davis and whoever else, he described the data as, I forget what word he used, disturbing or something. You know what I mean? Something of in that regard. And when I heard that, I don't know. I don't correlate that with, the UAPs and that sort of. I guess my question is, what do you think about that? About him using that term?
And I forget it's a great question. I forget the exact word that he used, but he was talking about the data that was obtained from Skinwalker Ranch. Here's one thing which ironically came up on my phone as well. A callback to the bulk of the money was being sent. Or spent, I should say, at Skinwalker Ranch and the research there. So here's how I would address that is I am always intrigued by people talking about interesting data. I can't wait to see it. What I would say, though, is the question I asked Luis Elizondo was when he started talking about the ranch, my biggest reservation is that the Defense Intelligence Agency would have either themselves or boots on the ground through a contractor working on U.S. soil. Now, I don't have all the time to go into it right now because I'm going to have to wrap up everything here in a moment. But
Understood.
But to have the DIA, which is a military branch, having boots on the ground on a ranch in Utah has always bothered me. Even if it's through a contractor, the question would be why? Why would the DIA want XYZ from a ranch in Utah? And so when I had politely interjected Mr. Elizondo and said, okay, wait, let me clarify. So you're saying that OSAP through Bass operated boots on the ground from Skinwalker Ranch and he backed up and he wouldn't confirm it. Now, I'm not trying to make any allegation.
Exactly.
Say that. I'm sorry. Say that again.
And that's exactly what he said it and then he backtracked.
Right.
He can't speak for them.
Yeah.
Whatever he said.
And so I don't want to place an accusation on him that he was misleading and I called him out on it and he backtracked. That's not where I'm going with it. However, what I would say, though, is by me terming it the way I did to just make it, you're saying that DIA/Bass was on the ground with OSAP money. He didn't go there. And that's what I think paves the way for the debate that I get myself in a lot of trouble with, in that, number one, that this was a sweetheart deal. And number two, that money went towards essentially off-book things, off-book projects. Off-book meaning DIA wanted an advanced aerospace propulsion study program that was talking about materials and human effects and propulsion and lift and all that stuff. The DIRDs reflect that that's the majority of what they did. But I think it's possible that Robert Bigelow/Bass/ that entire team went off the reservation a bit. And that's where I think the debate is. And that's why I wanted to push. So you're saying DIA was on the ground, and that's when it kind of backtracked and went, well, I'm not speaking for Bigelow. So I think that the jury is way still out on OSAP and what Bass wanted to do versus what the DIA wanted them to do. But that is another story in itself. But hey, I don't want to cut you off. I want to get to a couple more of these, and I'm going to have to cut the video, sadly. But I really do
your
appreciate.
thing, John.
Yeah, I
Thank
really
you so
appreciate
much.
you calling. Please stay tuned to the channel. Call anytime. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thank you. You as well. And I'm sorry I can't get to everything. This has been a very active live stream. I've been apprehensive to do them just because some of you have been so shy on the phones, but now it's just blowing up. A couple thank yous. Brandon, thank you so much for that super chat request. Again, anybody who decides to put anything into that super chat, I'll try and answer your question if you got one, or it just, all of that goes right into the support for the Black Vault and creating videos like this. Tori, always good to see you. Thank you so much for that support. You are very welcome. Thank you for that sticker on there. Daryl, thank you for this entire chat. Is there any one case that has caused you to dig the deepest, and what is it? Thank you and everyone else for putting up with my noob questions. Daryl, you can call anytime or text anytime. You're always welcome. Noob questions, if you want to call them that, I wouldn't, but if you want to call them that, are always welcome. I love them on this channel. Is there something that sticks out to me that is more than anything else? No, I don't know that there's one case that I just really put my heart and soul into. In the broad spectrum, absolutely. I just go for those government documents on UFOs to prove the cover up. So I would say on a broad spectrum way to answer your question, that's what I do. One specific case, not really. Things just kind of go as time passes. You know, this case will be popular, that case, and I'll push on that, or this topic will be big, I'll push on that, but it just kind of keeps going. So so I would have to answer your question more broad spectrum versus anything specific. All right, one or two more, because I know my wife and kids are about to bust through the door. Tori from South Carolina, are you releasing another book? I assume this might be the same Tori. So Tori, you are awesome. Am I releasing another book? All right. So I have been asked to do what I call a third in the sequence of the books I've done in the last couple of years. COVID has made it very, very challenging. I made reference to my wife's schedule. Writing is very, very tough. So I had to politely put it on hold. Is it in my plan for the future? Absolutely. But things have just been crazy. And sadly, that book, what I call book number 3, I guess technically it would be my 5th. But third in this particular series, I've had to sadly put on hold. But stay tuned for that. As things kind of clear up and there's light at the end of the tunnel, I hope to God it's not a train and we're almost through this. Hopefully schedules will subside a bit and I'll be able to get going with it. As a new experiencer, having an experience is stressful as well as exciting. Lots of sleepless nights. That's what I get for being eager to have an experience in the first place. But it's worth it when you have evidence to gather. Yes, gather that evidence. That is always a plus. Thank you for that comment. And I'd love to just continue to hang out with you guys. Great numbers tonight. Lots of phone calls. I'm sorry for the one that's on hold, and I think there's a couple behind it. I'm just going to have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, but I do appreciate all of that support in the chat. If you're thinking about supporting the site, the best thing you can do is spread the word, whether it be the videos or the articles or the documents. That is hands down the biggest, that is the biggest thanks that you can give me if you wanted to support the site. If you feel like buying me a cup of coffee or whatever it is, away from the super chat, there is the Patreon. There's not a link below because this was kind of an impromptu, but it's on the website, and I'll make sure I edit the video, and put the link down there after we go off of live. And again, the calls keep coming in. I'm sorry, guys, for having to cut you off, but I want to say thank you again to all of you. Thank you all for your support and listening in. There's always a lot to cover on this channel, and I'll definitely be doing this again because I was really motivated by the amount of people that are interacting. Maybe we'll just do a full show just with calls and I won't do anything else. Anyway, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. As you know, this is John Greenwald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time.